A little over 4 years ago, thanks to the work I was doing as a computer programmer, I was invited to enroll in a mid-level technical college near New York City. My innate programming skills were well honed, and since the college was well known, many technology companies sent their recruiters there, so I soon had several suitors interested in my skills. However, many of my friends were from small, family-owned trucking companies, and I saw an opportunity to help them and also get away from corporate money, which seemed like slavery to me. It may have been a well-paying job, but 70 to 80 hours a week left no time for a personal life. I took basic software that allowed trucking companies to offer slots, track their trucks and loads, pick up or deliver loads, and improved it by incorporating many other aspects of the trucking world. If they were in the same city and there was a request for a delivery, I could match the supplier and the driver, which saved a lot of effort for both parties. The program even scheduled maintenance. My student friends were happy to work in their spare time because I paid them well. I knew that as the end of the course approached, I would have to decide what to do with the business. The trucking companies were happy that I was continuing and told me so in no uncertain terms. I took a huge load off their shoulders, and they increased their profits by reducing the number of freight trips. I agreed. Now I just needed to find a place to work. It was a decision I made together with someone else, which I now sincerely regret. About a year before I finished the course, I met a beautiful girl named Charlie who was studying at a nearby college. She was about 5 feet 7 inches, with hair down to the middle of her back, green eyes that sparkled with mischief, and lips that could sell dreams. Charlie always made it clear that she was going home after the course. She asked me to go with her. There were no jobs in the small town where she lived. She hinted that I had always said I could be anywhere and still do my job, which was true, but only to a certain extent. I allowed her to take me with her to her hometown. The first few meetings didn't go very well. Before the trip, I made a list of everything I would need to run a computer business: broadband fiber optic internet with a speed of at least 1 gigabyte, electricity, a backup power source, phone lines, and offices with room to expand. Her father and uncle said they had all of that. The first shock came when Charlie told me upon arrival that I had to stay in a motel by myself while she would live with her parents, who didn't approve of their daughter fooling around with someone. My inner voice said, "Bullshit." The second shock came when I was waiting for her father and uncle, the owner of the building, and saw her in the distance, very close and very affectionately hugging several guys. They were so close that my inner voice told me, "Get out of there." To my shame, I didn't listen. Her father and uncle must have believed that the deal was done, but when I told them, probably more sharply than usual because of what I had just seen, that the building and other conditions were terrible and unsuitable for our purposes, from the leaky roof, insufficient electrical outlets, an 1830s backup generator, and no fiber optic broadband internet, even though fiber optic cables were only 75 yards away. To make matters worse, my uncle wanted to charge Manhattan prices, even though the market price in that area was about 2% of that amount. My past was harshly criticized. Worse still, they continued to call me an English bastard, even though I'm actually Scottish. I left and headed to where I had last seen Charlie to tell her I was leaving. I didn't need a motel after all. Charlie seemed very unhappy to see me, as if I had broken something. The 3 boys who were with her looked like their toys had been taken away. My inner voice said again, "Leave." I must have had "sucker" written on my forehead because I didn't listen. I told her I was leaving because it wasn't going to work out. Charlie seemed genuinely upset. I believed she wanted me to open a business in her town. Only later did I realize that she wanted to be independent, and I had gotten in the way by coming to her. I walked back to the car. Charlie tried to stop me. I told her the building wasn't right, that it was just her uncle trying to scam me. I said there were other options I was going to look into. She could come with me or stay with her friends. Maybe my tone made her think I suspected her of something, but she said she would come with me. She seemed very upset about leaving, as were her 3 friends. After that, We argued for several weeks, and our friends with benefits relationship ended. I should have listened to my inner voice. She's to blame for everything. In the end, she did come with me to look at other properties. Even she realized how unsuitable the building in her hometown was for business. I didn't know it at the time, but I'm sure she kept her father and uncle informed about what I was doing and what the standards were for other buildings. In the meantime, I talked to my friend and lawyer Bill. He said, "Listen to your heart. There are many stories about how close-knit people are in small southern towns. Don't let her lead you on. If you go ahead with this, say you get married, you'll need a solid prenuptial agreement. I'll draw it up and have her sign it along with other business documents, such as health insurance, if necessary." Charlie and I set up a meeting, and I told her it was over. I didn't like what I saw, and I didn't like that her father and uncle were trying to deceive me. She was furious. How could I believe she was capable of such a thing? She was just happy to see her friends. There was nothing going on, and there couldn't be. My inner voice screamed, "She's lying! Get out!" I told her I couldn't live like that, wondering if she was cheating on me behind my back. I was walking away from someone I believed I loved, someone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, but cheating wasn't in my nature, and I hoped it wasn't in the nature of the person I wanted to be with. Long story short, my passion won out, and soon I moved to her city, and we got married, just a year and a half before it all came crashing down on us. True to his word, Bill made her sign a bunch of papers, including a prenup stating that she would get nothing if he ever cheated on her. About 9 months before that, I started noticing changes. We had sex 3 or 4 times a week, but never on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Fridays. Charlie always liked to know where I was so she could be close, as she put it. Looking back, the best thing that happened was that the town became famous for its favorite son, Senator Will Davis. We didn't get along because I didn't want to sacrifice my principles for his political goals. He was so right-wing that Trump looked like a communist compared to him. Charlie's family idolized him. We argued about his latest bill, which he said gave workers more rights. Yeah, right, as if they didn't have any. I was called an English communist bastard for pointing out that an employer can fire an employee if they don't like the way they look or the way they do something. No rights. The second bone in her family's throat was that I didn't want to pay for the town's Independence Day celebrations. The first year I paid, but as far as I could see, the money wasn't spent on the celebration, even though her father bought a new car. I told them I had to invest the money in the business because I was losing customers, as a rival firm was offering them additional services that I had been forced to refuse, because last year they had. Convinced me they weren't necessary. If I didn't do it, the 100 people I had hired would lose their jobs. That was a quarter of the adult population of the city. They didn't like that. One Tuesday morning, I was working but got stuck on a new code that was supposed to make the package better, more flexible, and more stable. I knew that if I took a walk, my mind would clear and I would be able to solve the problem by figuring out what needed to be done to achieve the desired result. I left the office and realized I was being followed. I saw my friend Charlie calling someone while looking at him. A few minutes later, Charlie called and asked what I was doing. I could hear the alarm in her voice, but it wasn't because of me, it was because of her. I told her I was going out for some fresh air, maybe to the park by the lake. When she finished her call, she seemed happier. My inner self had awakened and wasn't going to give up. Rumor has it that the last 2 rooms in the motel can be rented for an hour or 2. They are used for romantic encounters with people who are not necessarily your partner. I headed there, trying not to be seen by potential witnesses. I was about 75 meters away, hiding behind a neighboring building, when I saw Charlie and her 2 friends, Don and Ed. Judging by the way they were hugging, I decided they were going to use one of those rooms, and I was right. I could have just walked in and beaten them both half to death. Instant gratification. Or I could do what I did. I decided to use my skills not only to get rid of the girl, but also to get revenge on her and everyone involved. First, I used an old phone that I had kept because it couldn't be hacked or tapped, and called one of my old friends, John, whose accounts make up about 25% of my client base. I didn't even have time to get back to the office when John called me. Those who were nearby heard me begging him not to take his business away from me. After his call, I walked through the office to my secretary. I needed a hotel room in John's town for 2 nights. Write down the name of the hotel and how to get there. I needed to go home to pack my things. To my surprise, Charlie wasn't home when I got back. I left her a note asking where she was, since she said she would be home all day. I explained that I had left so as not to lose my biggest client. To hell with her family, who demanded that I not work extra hours to support my clients, but simply give money for city festivals, which ended up being a new car for her father. Charlie and her father didn't like that. They let me know when I got back. I just dumped everything that had been building up on them. I was no longer the easygoing husband they thought they could control. Charlie refused to provide sexual services, but I wouldn't have touched her anyway, so I was happy. In the 2 days I was gone, John and I came up with a plan to get back at them all. I bought surveillance equipment, a new phone, but most importantly, I found a place to move my business. 1,200 miles away from that cheating bitch. I spent the next 6 weeks traveling, pretending to try to save the business, but really training new employees. Unfortunately, some companies canceled their orders and switched to a new firm. When I returned, I rented 2 rooms in a motel. Everyone knew that Abe drank, and after 9 o'clock at night, you could just take the keys and go into the rooms. I set up cameras and checked the video quality. Everything worked perfectly. I downloaded the video to a file that I hid on Abe's computer. When the scandal broke, any investigation would have led to him and exposed the potential blackmail. The video was also downloaded via a secure VPN to a computer connected through 10 countries. Good luck trying to hack it. I also installed several cameras in my house. I finally figured out that for some reason, Charlie changes his bed sheets on Wednesdays and Fridays. On Friday, I was going bowling. In our team of 4, I was the only one who hadn't been replaced once all week. I was in a bad mood, especially because of my stupidity. When I returned to the office, I saw a notice from her uncle about the renewal of the building lease. The bastard had increased the rent 5-fold. He wanted me to sign the contract immediately. I told him I wouldn't sign until I found clients. He was unhappy. There were only 6 weeks left before the current contract expired, so my uncle decided he could wait. I could wait too, as I had started working on other plans. I was working on new software and told my employees that because of its complexity, I had hired specialists to install it. 2 weeks before the deadline, I got a call. They couldn't come, but I could send them the computers. It would take 5 days. I was furious, but I had no choice but to agree. On the Friday before the lease expired, all the computers had to be loaded and sent for upgrading. The employees were told not to come to work until Tuesday. The video surveillance was working well. Abe was a dirty bastard. He hadn't changed the sheets in a week, and there were at least 4 incidents a day in every room. On Tuesday afternoon, from 12 to 3, Charlie, Don, Ed, and Duffus, sometimes with the help of her father, went to the apartment. The pastor joined them several times. The pastor met with the women 3 times a week in the morning. Several men I had quarreled with had started affairs with other married women. I gathered all the information, and since their wives were nice, some even tried to hint to me what was going on. I sent them the information they needed to divorce these bastards. The pastor's ministry was handed over to the evangelical mission he belonged to, as well as to some state media outlets. I printed copies of Charlie's photos with all her partners, whether there were 1, 2, 3, or 4. She liked to be inconspicuous. When I left the office on Friday, I left letters on all their desks informing them that they were fired because they had been laughing behind my back, knowing that my soon-to-be ex-wife was having an affair with one of them. Thanks, Mr. Senator. No severance pay. I delivered 3 letters personally, as these women had been very helpful to me and were stuck in marriages as bad as mine. I told them that if they left their husbands, they should come to my new office. I paid them the same as I had before the new hiring law was introduced. I gave them copies of the photos of their husbands having fun with other women. When Charlie went to church on Sunday, I followed her. When everyone went inside, I hung all the photos of her, her lovers, and the pastor with his whores all over the church and down the street. As I was doing this, I heard the pastor talking about adultery. I went in and shouted at him, "You should have thought about that when you were sleeping with Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Davis." Charlie stood up, furious at me. "Listen, you whore, Tom, Dick, and Harry had their fun with you. Your father and uncle did too. It's illegal, even in this state. The only thing you'll get is divorce papers. Have a nice day." As I walked away, the waiter came over and served her. Her screams were music to my ears as I walked away, leaving her and this town behind. My uncle may have believed he had me, but I tore up all the new building leases, so there was no DNA or fingerprints on the ones he presented. Since he had bought the restaurant across the street, which was popular with my employees, he had no customers left. Too bad. Since the local judge was a family member, my divorce petition was filed in a neighboring county. Charlie tried to find support, but the prenuptial agreement was ironclad. Our house was rented, registered to an offshore company, so she had to pay the rent or leave. The local police were investigating her father and uncle on suspicion of incest. I was free after the breakup. I drove over 100 miles and stopped to look at the ocean. The waves crashing against the shore washed away the anger I felt as the sea renewed itself before crashing down again. I understood that. I had left behind what had once seemed most important to me, the most important person in my life. Now I was moving on, to a new life, a new freedom. Those I left behind could burn in the fires of their damnation, especially my soon-to-be ex-wife and her many lovers. I hoped there was a special place for pastors. There is no God. Religion is only needed to control the gullible, and this pastor was definitely taking advantage of that. When the waves washing the shore calmed my anger, I smiled and began my journey to a new home, free from that fucking bitch. Epilogue. Of course, my family tracked me down in my new life. When they tried to ambush me, my new friends and colleagues beat them to a pulp, and they left with their personal equipment in pieces. For some reason, I was very popular. I didn't date for a while, but eventually I found Lisa, who was perfect for me. I never felt like my inner self gave me any reason to worry about her. She understood my need to take my time and learn to trust again. We got married, and I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. Life is good, things are going well, my family is wonderful, even if a little noisy with kids running around. So, if your inner self is telling you to run, do it. Save yourself the suffering and heartache. Don't let anyone else control your life.